Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Dods Diversity workshop on LGBT plus people in the workplace and how we can help support them. My name is, as Grace said, Adrian Hyyrylainen-Trett. I work for E&EI, which is the Employers Network for Equality and Inclusion, and I'm their Global Membership Development Manager. And just a few words just to start off the sessions today. Again, I'll reiterate the questions and answers are always a really good point to bring to each of people's presentations. So please do interact using the facilities that Grace has so expertly explained in the introduction. And at the same time, obviously, if you have any technical issues, then do use the chat box, as she said. I'm going to make some very overarching introductions in terms of the subject today, because we have a great array of amazing speakers, and I don't want to take any of their thunder, because they all have very particular points to raise, and so I'm going to be quite strategic in my opening remarks, and I'll possibly be a bit more detailed at the closing remarks, so we shall see what happens then. But what we do know is that within the workplace, there is still a lot of work to do to bring LGBT plus equality to its importance in the role. We know from a Stonewall report in 2018 that 35% of LGBT staff still conceal their sexual orientation or their gender identity at work. And we also, due to fear of discrimination, whilst we also know that actually nearly 2/3 of young people who are come out at university but then go back into the closet when they come to get their first job, they also have a real reluctance at being open about their sexual orientation or gender identity in the workplace. And we really need to overcome that. And there are four key, I suppose, elements that are very strategic, which I think are essential to bring this issue up to the standards we would all like to have and the equality and inclusion that we feel comfortable with. And that is that, firstly, policy. Policy is obviously the basics, but it needs to be there, and it needs to be there in very clear guidance, using the correct terminology, and using the terminology that incorporates the LGBT plus community, whether that's referring to parental leave, adoption, whatever it might be. We need to have the right terms to ensure that everybody feels included. And therefore, policy is that standard bearer that needs to be there at the starting point. But there are lots of work to do around that, and that's where the different supports of inclusion and diversity that we can all talk about today come into things. And people's experience, you'll hear from their different points of view, will add to that development. So things like employee resourcing groups, staff networks, where perhaps they may start out as a social, more just interactive place for people from an LGBT background to get together, may in fact actually push business to ensure that their views and their ideas are heard. And that also encourages the workforce as a whole to incorporate LGBT plus equality at the same time. So those are a starting point. But also engaging with allies and role models at all levels in the business is really critical. Having a key sponsor who's a CEO or a senior member of the management team leading on LGBT plus equality means that it's shared throughout the organisation as a holistic and valued approach. And that is something that's crucial in ensuring that people who are both non-LGBT plus and LGBT plus work together. And having that sort of senior sponsorship is something which is really crucial for the development of this within all businesses and at all levels. And finally, the one other key point I wanted to make was around language barriers. I'm going to say to you what my pronouns are this morning, he, him, and his. And I'd like, hopefully, all our speakers to use their pronouns, because that is an indication that we are open and tolerant and want to listen to everyone's different ways that they describe themselves in their own individual unique identity. And I'll come back to that point in my closing speech around unique identities at work in due course. But I think it's really critical that that open understanding of knowing that you will be welcomed, celebrated, and being your authentic self at work by using the pronouns that best suit you, and it's what you prefer to be referred to, are something that is on the table when you start, and it's not something that's questioned throughout any meeting or organizational questioning. So I think looking at those key elements of the spectrum, these are very hybrid strategic backgrounds to ensuring that LGBT plus inclusion is absolutely at the top of priority of all workplaces. But there are strategic barriers within that, and I think during the course of today we will hopefully hear from our glamorous speakers who will be able to tell us a lot more about their own personal experiences, but also how to get to the point where inclusion and diversity is not a question to be asked, it's automatic. It's part of the values of an organization, and those values are communicated also, not just internally through from the CEO downwards within newsletters or within promotions, but also externally. When people want to join a new organizational company, they want to see that that company represents their values and their understandings. And therefore having a diversity section on a company's website, employing the use of different pronouns, employing the use of networks, is a way to encourage people to join that particular organization, because they know it's going to fit the values that they have and they're going to belong to. And that's one other very critical area where we're coming to in terms of theory of diversity, is around the belonging and being part of a community as well as being part of an organization, and the intersectionality that crisscrosses across all different representations and protected characteristics. I will focus on the intersectionality part of my closing speech, so I'm not going to give anything away on that front before we start. But there's something for us all to think about during the course of the day, and how we can improve that intersectionality across all different protected characteristics, and especially the LGBT plus Q spectrum, which includes a lot of different areas and understandings.